Okay, today we are going to talk about The Killer by David Fincher, starring Michael Fassbender. And basically, the premise of the plot is about a contract assassin. It's also based on the comic by this gentleman named Matz, I believe, a French comic book artist and author. I'm really not familiar with him, but there it is. He's the one who came up with it. And the premise of the story is basically what we have is just an assassin who is sent on. We're watching him, and he's going on a job, and we're watching to see. Basically, that's kind of the premise, is more or less just following an assassin. And what I wanted to talk about and kind of highlight is asking the question of what went wrong, which is kind of a Debbie Downer of things to say. But basically, what we've got is the movie has 61% on Rotten Tomatoes. I think that's the audience score, and a 6.7 on IMDb. Which, when you think about it, it's got to be, David Fincher, Michael Fassbender. Like, I love both these guys; they're phenomenal at what they do. But this is pretty okay as far as movie scores go. Anything, me and my brother have a thing where we talk about basically anything that's a 7 on IMDb is usually pretty good. It's watch it. But when you go below that, that kind of gets into, maybe watch it once and then forget about it. That kind of seems to be a bit more akin to what we are. And the other thing is, this wasn't one of those things where even the audience had a low, there was a disagreement between the audience and the critics or anything like that. Critics actually had it higher, I think, on Rotten Tomatoes. But this one had the audience have it as pretty low, which to me, in most situations, is what matters more. There's some difference in there, but I'm more of an audience member than a critic. So I care about the audience opinion as opposed to the critical opinion. I'm not a cinebuff. I like stories. I like movies and watching it. But that's kind of where, I'm not a critic, basically. So I'm not watching about the artisanal beauty and such of the movie. Like, Dune was a beautiful movie, and it had cool explosions and sci-fi and great action and all that stuff. So, but basically what we're here to talk about is what went wrong. And what I'm going to focus on specifically is talking about the opening scene or act. So a lot of movies, and I've talked about this, kind of have an opening scene or action sequence, which will give you a flavor of the movie, and it'll act as a microcosm for the whole movie. So what we have Casino, let's see, Royale, basically where he's chasing the bomb maker, more or less. And that gives you an idea of what's the scene. He's going after it. He's finding the bad guys. There's this guy. He's chasing after the bomb. Action, shooting, He gets the guy, he shoots the guy, he kills the guy, and bam. But that kind of acts as a microcosm, and then he's going to basically repeat this for the big arc of the movie. Casino Royale has that. Inglourious Bastards has one. Where the famous scene that launched 1,000 video YouTube essayists was the one with Hans Landa, where he's finding is the SS guy who comes in to go find the Jew hunter. Basically, from there we had that. Terminator, where give me your coat, give me your bike. You have all these aspects where this is your intro scene, which sets the tone. It sets expectations, and it usually acts almost as a mini plot, where basically with Casino Royale, you can have this, he's doing this, he's going here, he's going after that, and then it kind of repeats itself, played out in full, and it fully develops in the main arc from there. And that kind of gives you an idea of what the story is going to be about. And they usually have these, hit my camera. They usually have these to kind of engage the audience, to make them interested, make them like the character. That's usually what they're make the audience, interested, like the character, basically. So you want your characters to be liked, so that way when you get them into situations that are tense or you want them to know what's going on. A great intro, I just thought of that one, is Finding Nemo. Where basically it's Marlin and his wife are talking about kids. They got a new house. They got this wonderful view, and they're gonna name one of their kids Nemo, and it's just gonna be awesome. They're this new family, and they get attacked by a shark, and then bam, That's the intro sequence. It's amazing. It's really good because, one, we like the character. We understand what their motivations are, and it makes sense then what their motivations are given the rest of the film, because finding Nemo's gone, and Marlin's not going to give up because he's lost all of his 200 or something of his kids. And the one that he named Nemo, that his wife wanted to name Nemo, he's missing. He's been kidnapped. So he's got to go rescue him. So it kind of has this. We are interested in seeing what happens because we want to see how Marlin reacts. It also is interesting because it then colors all the rest of it. Because you think you have the scary attack, basically, here as far as plot time. And then you have this whole school sequence where Marlin acts like a paranoid parent. And you see, imagine if we had switched that, where we'd move this over here, where Marlin was paranoid before the whole school sequence from here. We don't like Marlin in here, in the school sequence. We understand why Marlin's there because of the attack, by the serial killer. But we don't like him here. But we have this attack in order to get us through this aspect. And this is kind of your vegetables as far as the necessary story building arc where you have to set up the failure of Marlin, the disconnect. Not really failure, I'm being a little bit mean, but you have the disconnect here of the storyline but this also is not exactly the most fun thing to watch, but because it happens before this attack, it makes it interesting because we want to see what happens, because we're already attached to Marlin's character. We sympathize with him. This kind of sets it up for you to get through this next sequence. And this is really what I think the killer doesn't do a great job of. So, the opening scene. Mr. Killerman is sitting in a empty, construction office station, basically, and he's looking out a window at a apartment, a luxury kind of townhouse apartment from the other end. He's got his sniper rifle here, and he's looking out at a window. Of course, in the beginning, there's no one in the window, and he's just kind of scoping around, and basically what we have is David Fincher's really going for kind of the realism aspect. And unfortunately, an aspect of realism is that not everything is exciting. In fact, it's kind of boring. So what he's trying to do is he's going to take this idea of an assassin, which is generally a very exciting sort of, dun 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 dun, explosions, gunshots, hot women, hot men, basically that kind of thing. That's kind of the James Bond sort of, if you will, idea of what an assassin or killer is. But then you have this idea of it's just a lot of boring. He's waiting around because the target hasn't shown up, and he's sitting here and he's trying to keep himself ready. He's trying to keep himself limber. He's trying to figure out, what to do, and he's just waiting for the target to show up, and he's just waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting. And so what you have then is you have this ongoing monologue, because of course the main character has no one to talk to. So in order to get any sort of dialogue, you have to have this inner monologue that's going along through the brain. And this is kind of what we get, and this is how we intro the character from there, where we don't really know anything about the character until he starts talking and starts introducing himself and kind of going into detail there, and then we get to understand, get an insight into his mind. And so again, think of what this is trying to do. We're trying to have, interested, character motivation, further plot. Why does the answer, of course, the most important question is what happens next. Your intro, basically, the intros always kind of leave a little bit like, okay, James Bond kills the bomb maker, and then you go to cut to the scene where he's in there with M, and she's chastising him, and they're trying to figure out, okay, what happens next? This is oftentimes, a lot of times, just talking about these intros, is a great one is The Dark Knight, where it starts off with that the robbery scene from the Joker. It doesn't always follow the main characters. It oftentimes can follow the villains. From there. Either way, so that's all to do this same thing. This is what it's trying to accomplish. Interested, we like the character, motivation, you understand what's going on, you're trying to see what happens next, and you can kind of get a better idea of what's going on in the story. And so what we have here is it's kind of boring. He's just waiting. He's waiting, he's waiting, he's watching, he's waiting, he's waiting, he's waiting, he's watching, he's waiting. He's watching, waiting, all that from there. So, and this is interesting because what you have is he's trying to do something different. Most stories rely on, sex, action, violence to engage the audience, because you don't really have to have compelling dialogue if it's like a torture scene. The audience is there because it's so intense. Generally, that's the idea of what's going on. But problem is that can get cheap and overused, and people can stop caring. That's kind of what I talked about with the John Wick series. With the John Wick series, where you're seeing this type of story where you're so used to it. You killed my family, you killed my dog, you killed my wife, you killed this, you killed that. Nope, we're doing a dog. We're doing it something different, because it's kind of playing on that sequence. And honestly, it really kind of follows. I was thinking about this the other day. It really follows a similar pattern to Perdition Road, or Road to Perdition, which is a great movie, pretty good movie. Kind of follows a similar plot line, but kind of amps it up a little bit more. And of course, the most important sequence is that it makes it about the dog. Because they're trying to play on this idea of it's what everyone does. Everyone kills the wife. Everyone kills the daughter. There's that terrible X-Men movie, I think Apocalypse or something like that, where they introduce this family for 5 minutes just to have the guy with the bow and arrow accidentally kill the daughter, and the Magneto goes nuts and stuff like that. It's all that was is basically just character motivation for, you killed my ex-wife, wife, daughter. And this is what John Wick does well. So what the story is trying to do is it's trying to do something different than that. It's trying to play something different. Now, here's the problem. Anytime you break the rules, quote unquote, rules of story writing or anything like that, you need to understand what they do. The reason why you killed my wife works is because we all understand this familial relationship, and it works. We care about people who do this. And it's funny because in the story, actually, goes to then do this, where after the fallout of this assassin hit, they go after his kind of fiance, girlfriend, wife, and torture her. And this provides motivation for the rest of the movie. But for this intro part, and what I'm talking is this basically, I got to page 25 and the script, which is more like page, I think it's like 15 to 20 minutes in the movie. Nothing is happening. And this is kind of the problem that the story runs into, is that you don't need nonstop action in the beginning. Like, all the examples I use were examples of stories that did do nonstop action, but you don't have to do that by any means. What you need to do is just make sure the audience is interested. This is the most important part. And we're not. The main problem I kind of had with it is there was kind of an issue where, number one, I didn't necessarily like the assassin. I didn't like the killer. I thought he was okay. I didn't really have a strong opinion about him one way or the other. It wasn't until later, when they attack his girlfriend, that I went, all right, he needs to go kill the bad guys. Up until that point, I was kind of ambivalent, because he wasn't really a great guy. He's not like the Justice Man, where you're trying to see like the Nazis get overthrown or something like that. He's just kind of going about his day. Which is the point of the movie. That's what they're trying to communicate from that. But what that means is I didn't really like him. So, okay, nothing exciting. No excitement is happening. Okay, from there. And another aspect which is kind of becomes apparent is he's talking about all this profession stuff, but the first instance that we get to see of the killer in action, he flunks. He flubs it, basically from here. Because what happens is eventually the target finally does show up, and the killer's going through his monologue, his practice. Don't improvise. You got the plan. Don't rush it. Get his BPM below 75. Breathe. All this stuff that he has, all his does, it kind of is showing to kind of like your flash roll to prove that you know what you're talking about. But at the end of the day, after all of this stuff, he flubs the shot, he misses the target, and ends up probably killing, mortally wounding a woman who's in the apartment, so likely some sort of prostitute or something like that, or, some other actress, we'll say, whatever her profession is. He basically almost likely kills her. And then he has to get up and run out of the apartment, scrub everything, and get out of the country. And then that takes kind of the next 10 minutes. And this is kind of the problem, is that we don't even like him because he's great, because he screws up. He seemingly screws up. Like, I get that he's good, but he doesn't seem to be that good, because evidently he screwed up the assassination. And what this does is it just doesn't really make us like the guy anymore. He flunks, no excitement in the story, and I didn't like him. I didn't like him. Like I liked his girlfriend. She seems nice and she seems loyal and she seems nice. And then the guys did and then what happens is the kind of the guy who contracts out two people show up to the killer's house when he finally makes it home, and it turns out they've beaten up his girlfriend and tortured her for his locations. She didn't tell him anything, so they put her in the hospital, but it turns out she's probably going to make it. And then her brother, the girlfriend's brother, is there, and he's like, hey, man, these two people came, and he's like, all right, I'm going to find them. And then that kind of sets up, and that is what sets up the next section of the story. Is basically the rest of the movie. You can kind of get an idea of, we want to see him find them and get justice for that, or anything like that. And this is kind of the problem that I have with the story, is that I'm not sold until like 25, 30 minutes into the movie, which is just, it's not there, and this is kind of an aspect where I feel like you need something else to keep and help keep the audience interested. And this is kind of an example that I really love and that I've kind of used several times, is there is one of my favorite authors and one of my favorite books, Haruki Murakami, Norwegian Wood. And there's an interesting aspect of this story because it follows a student and kind of his life as he's going to university and kind of his friendships and stuff like that. And it's very, Murakami's books are very, very good about having inner monologues and kind of talking about the day-to-day life. And this is like quiet, magical, realist contemplation. And they have this aspect, but they're interesting. And so the question is, of course, how does he do it? Another great one is Wind Up Bird. We'll call Wind Up Bird. And so how does he and basically nothing in these books really happens for like 60 pages. It's like this nonsense. But the question is, how does he keep us interested? And so what you have is, you have some aspect of what's no excitement, they're not necessarily experts, these are not trained assassin with, over here he's talking about his, I put in my 10,000 hours, I'm so good. And again, I'm being a little bit sardonic on that aspect, is I didn't really like the guy. So when he's talking about kind of low key, talking about all of his achievements or anything, it doesn't do much for me. So in Wind Up Bird Chronicle, Kalta Ano, or one of them gives the main character a phone call in the very early says, want to have phone sex. And that's completely left field. It throws you completely off kilter. And of course, not of course, but the main character then says, nah, and then hangs up. And what does this do? One, this is a really bizarre situation because it's built in this realistic worldview, and we're trying to figure out what's happening. And this person then comes up and propositions our main character, and then he says no, thus proving he is above, these lewd allurements or anything like that. We trust the main character. We like the main character, and that is what causes us to like the main character. And so then when he goes and looks for his cat for the next 60 pages, we're willing to stick with him. Because one, Murakami's an amazing writer, but that kind of part, be amazing, is not really that helpful of an encouragement for anyone. And I can definitely understand that, because being like Murakami is really, really difficult. It's not an easy thing to do. And so what we have here is, this is what helps motivate us and push us through the next stage. Norwegian Wood, what you have is there is a roommate that the main character has that they nickname Stormtrooper. And he's kind of got these weird, he's this like super military buff. He's that guy who eats the MREs and pretends to like them. He gets up at 5 a.m. and does calisthenics. He knows what calisthenics is. Exercises, and he has this one-track mind. And kind of a lot of the first section of the book, it gets us through to the end because Stormtrooper's interesting. The main character in this book, in the beginning portion, is not interesting. Stormtrooper is interesting. And that's what kind of helps get you through to that stage where you can get through all of those, those vegetables, of a story, where it's the parts that are very important but that aren't the most exciting, that you're building on, you're kind of going from there. And these two aspects are what help get the story to the end, and then more characters show up, and then you get a better feel for our character because he doesn't have anything, and because this is what the story demands. And then you get to, then you start to understand the story and get more invested and more invested. Now, you don't have to do any of this, but this is just two examples where if you're wanting to, because these two stories start off very slow. They're very slow, nothing too exciting, nothing too crazy. It's fairly normal. It's not like 1Q84 where little people start jumping out of the mouths of, sleeping people or anything like that, or it's like crazy cult or, attack or anything like that. It's just very, very kind of slow, this slow build of a story, basically, as opposed to, something where it immediately goes, from 0 to level 10, as opposed to 2 to 3 or something like that. This is the relative interest of the story. But these two aspects keep us in there. So what The Killer needed, the movie needed, is it needed something to keep us going. There's a few options. I'm just going to try. He could have, one is watch The Neighbors. Maybe The Neighbors are having a drama that unfolds. I feel like maybe they kind of hint at that, where he's watching these people go about their daily lives, but never really gives us anything to sink our teeth into. It's just watching The Neighbors. They're walking from point A to point B. That's one option for it. One option is maybe he's doing something that makes him endearing. Maybe he's trying and failing at something. This is the idea where we kind of like failure because they're identifiable, but then you also want your character to be good at something because they're going to go into a tense situation. This is kind of the reason why the main character, Ladybug from Bullet Train, is great, is because he's really good at his job. He's really good at snatch and grabs. But he's basically kind of a screwball that you get from the intro, where he's talking about, I'm really trying to get my headspace in the right order, positivity in, positivity out, negativity in, I'm talking with my therapist, it's really great. He's trying, and he is kind of a screwball, but we like him. We like him as a character, so we're willing to see what it is. But he's really good at his job. He knows he's a spy, he can fight, he can escape, he's trying to figure out what's going on, yada, yada. He has all this aspect. He's not perfect, but what we have here is we kind of have this I am speed sort of guy without delivering on the speed. He's got his 10,000 hours, don't improvise, all this stuff. And I'm making it sound worse than it is, but it's one of those things where it doesn't deliver. And this is kind of the problem, I think, with the story, is that if we don't like the main character, there needs to be something else. And that's another thing where he kills, he's the killer, and that didn't really throw me off too much, but he's not a good person, and that's fine. But there needs to be something else that draws you in. Because again, not everyone has to be, Captain America, Justice Man. You just need someone to kind of fill out these aspects and fill out these roles that we can really build on and kind of use and work with. Because otherwise, there's not a whole lot pulling us into the next section. Once he fires the shot and misses and hits the lady and then runs away, there's not really anything that drives me or pulls me close to that main character from there. He doesn't have a moment, a heartfelt moment with anyone. He's completely alone, which I get. And that's the thing where it's like the atmosphere, the dynamic, all these things that Fincher is going after is this, isolation. It's just him and his monologue. But he needs to do something to get me to like him. Maybe he's working on a jigsaw puzzle and he can't figure it out. That could be something that he's working on a jigsaw puzzle here maybe there's another table here, and this is where his jigsaw puzzle will go. And he's got all the little pieces here, basically, from at that point. A nice pile of puzzles, and of course that one puzzle piece over on the floor. That could be it. He could be working on a jigsaw puzzle. He could be reading a book or writing a book. He's trying to figure out. That's what you could just have a fictional book that he's reading, and that book is really exciting. Maybe that book is really exciting from there, and that's what helps give it. And again, and this is kind of the push and pull, is Fincher's after this kind of boring monotonousness, and he succeeds. And puts that in the movie. And that's the problem. We need something else. We need something going for us to carry us to, and of course make us ask the most important question: what happens next? So that way we can get to this point, maybe 30 minutes in, to where you killed my, let's add her over here. We'll call her the girlfriend. I'm going to find them. And that's what leads to the next one. So, But yeah, I think that kind of covers everything I wanted to talk about. So I hope you guys enjoyed that, and I will see you in the next one.